Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. I've actually already filmed this video, and in the video when I started editing it, I noticed how loud my fish tank was being. I guess I didn't realize it because normally it's not as loud, but there was like some type of water blockage thing and it was being really loud. So I had to delete the whole thing and I'm refilming it today, which honestly I don't even mind because this is such an interesting topic that it really doesn't bother me talking about it twice. It's so funny, I keep filming around the time that this school bus like drops off in our neighborhood at the end of the day. I gotta stop timing it around the same time because I have to deal with like tons of moms and their kids just walking past our house looking straight up at our window, and here's me with the shades wide open because I still use natural light, sitting here filming myself. You know, I only can imagine what they think. This is actually my merch. If you have not checked it out, there's a link to check it out below. I'm still doing the reincarnation series and I plan on doing more of them. You guys seem to really like the last one. If you didn't see it, I'll link it below. It's a fascinating story. I've talked a lot about my religious beliefs on here and how I'm more of a spiritual person, not part of an organized religion or a church or anything like that, but I'm a really spiritual person. I see life and consciousness as a giant network that may span literally galaxies. You know, our whole universe could be one consciousness stream, and when you say reincarnate, maybe it's not just reincarnate on this planet, it's reincarnate to other galaxies, other dimensions. Like when you think about it that way, your mind gets really blown. The reason I bring that up is today's story really kind of goes there. Today we are talking about a little boy from Russia who believes in his past life he lived on Mars. Yes, I know this sounds crazy. This is definitely not something I can prove to you. You know, past life stuff, you have to take the person's word for it, and you know, 100% of the time in reincarnation stories, it's kids that are remembering these amazing, incredible things that there's no way they just could have known about. But at the end of the day, it's still your choice to believe it or not. So that's how I want you guys to look at this video. You know, be open-minded, take it all in, and then I want to hear your honest thoughts at the end. Now, the little boy we're going to be talking about today has resurfaced. I actually found this through Collective Evolution. Great website for interesting stories like this, you guys. I'll leave it below. This is only being reported on now, but this has been a big story in Russia for a really long time. So I'm curious if I have any Russian subscribers, if you've heard of this story. I'm horrible with pronouncing Russian names, so I'm gonna leave his name here, but I know his first name is pronounced Boriska and it means little Bruno. And he was born on January 11th, 1996. I watched an interview with him. I think he was about 11 at the time. I'm gonna put the link below to it. It's like the only full interview of him that I can find. It's by Project Camelot. But what made Boriska so amazing from the beginning is that he held his head up without any support at 15 days old. And his mom just knew, because she's a doctor, that that was completely unusual and gifted. And not only that, but Boriska is smart. He's definitely like child genius. He has maturity like I've never seen. 4 months old, he was already pronouncing words, and it wasn't long until he was pronouncing full sentences and reading like newspaper titles. At age 1.5, he could read, draw, and paint. He would go into school and just blow teachers away with how smart he was. At a very young age, he was speaking full sentences, telling stories. He knew a bunch of things that no one had any idea how he would know, like things that his parents didn't even know. His vocabulary was incredibly intricate, and he also has incredible memory skills. Parents didn't teach him anything in particular about space, but he talked about space all the time, and they noticed early that he knew things that they didn't teach him. They weren't quite sure about where he was getting it from. Now, most past life memories for kids start around 35 months. That seems to be the sweet spot where a lot of them start having intense past life memories. And it was around that time that Boriska first started talking about being from Mars. They would even find him meditating alone in his room, and eventually realized they thought he was speaking to some type of outside sources. He would meditate to the point where he was like in a trance. And if you didn't know, if you don't know much about meditation, there's like groups that literally meditate for hours and hours. I would love to be able to do that one day. Nowhere near that. My mind is not trained to be still that long, but people who get really into meditation say that they literally travel to other dimensions and like speak with other beings. But they would catch him meditating and learning things from some type of external source. Boriska started getting a lot of attention in Russia when he was 7 because he was on this camping trip and there happened to be a professor there. He was a witness to Boriska randomly telling a group of older people to sit down and listen to him around this campfire. And that was the first time that he really shared his his story and what he claims to have been through in his past life with a large group of people. And he captivated all of these men because his extreme vocabulary and immense maturity. They were completely taken aback and shocked by him. And let me tell you what Boriska claims his life was like in the past. Now remember, he's no longer 7, he's older now. I don't even believe you can find him on the internet. This is kind of like fallen off. That's what makes, you know, there's so much mystery around it. Of course, there's a huge language barrier and culture barrier, so it's hard to find like up-to-date information. So a lot of this was done a while back. Boriska claimed to be from Mars. He claimed to be an alien. He was, you know, what he called a Martian. And he claimed that Martians breathe carbon dioxide. They stop aging at age 35, so they're partially immortal. So you can still, they can be killed, but not by natural causes. They won't just die of old age. They stay at 35, which is a nice age to just cap off at, I must say. And apparently they are super tall. And according to him, they still are on Mars. According to him, this was a long time ago, this past life. And it was back when Earth had only one continent and it had only one country or landmass, and it was Lemuria. Lemuria is similar to Atlantis in that there's a lot of proof of it, but you can't prove 100% it was real or much about it because it's gone now. This was like before, you know, countries split out into Pangea. This was like, but when it was just one landmass, according to him. That's what the Earth was like then, and there was Lemurians living on it. Same time, there was a full-blown society on Mars. He said this was an advanced society with buildings, cities, like a huge thing. During this time, his lifetime, they got into a huge war. There was, you know, nuclear bombs, and they destroyed their atmosphere. They can no longer live on the outer layer of their planet. So according to Boriska, they're still alive, some Mars people, some Martians, and they're chilling up inside Mars. It all sounds crazy until you hear some NASA backup, which I will get to. This has been a theory forever. Before I even knew this was a theory, one time I was just having a deep talk with Josh and I brought this up like literally a couple years ago and said, you know, what if Mars was a full planet like Earth? Because if you didn't know, Mars is actually one of the most similar planets to Earth. What if there was like a full, you know, society living on Mars and they ruined their atmosphere, now they're this, you know, red barren planet? And could Earth head in the same direction if we don't change things? He talked about how they also tried to create a second sun out of Jupiter, and that's what the spot on Jupiter is. Some type of nuclear fusion something where they were trying to create a sun and it failed, which is interesting because that's what Baba Vanga brought up about the future, that we would try to eventually create a second sun. If you haven't seen my Baba Vanga video, I'll link it below. It's super interesting. But according to Boriska, he was actually part of the military and he would fly to Earth. They would go back and forth. Back then, the two planets were completely, you know, interstellar communication, and Mars, still to this day, according to him, still has communication with other galaxies, other, you know, space races, and can access and get to different star systems.
The people from Mars traveled along many galaxies.
Boriska said that he would fly to Earth in these like triangle looking planes like this. So very similar to what people describe seeing every, you know, there's literally thousands of UFO sightings. They can't all be explained by something else. Most of them are that shape, so that totally makes sense. But he would talk about how he would fly from Mars to Earth and he would visit the ancient Egyptians. He would talk about the Sphinx. In fact, he said that there are keys to life within the Sphinx, which is interesting, which is, you know, in Giza. And recently in the Pyramid of Giza, they have discovered there's this whole hidden room. And if you guys want to see a video on it, or maybe Josh will do a video on it, thumbs up if you guys are interested in that. But there's like a secret room, a chamber inside of the Pyramid of Giza, and they're getting close to being able to figure out how to get to it without destroying the whole thing. It's really interesting. He says that behind the Sphinx ear, there's some type of button or switch that opens the Sphinx, and that the secrets that we all want so badly, the secrets of who we are, what we are, the truth about everything, are within the Sphinx. I mean, we don't know if that's true, obviously. No one's gone to check. It's not like you can just climb on up to the ear and open the thing. It's still gonna be a mystery for probably a while. Boriska described an extremely advanced group living on Earth, living on Mars, like everyone together was really mature. There was a lot of planetary cooperation, and that somehow we just got disconnected from the whole thing. What's really interesting is the people that live on Mars, he said that their atmosphere is so messed up that they can only survive by breathing carbon dioxide underneath the ground, and that they can't come to Earth and visit us because they cannot breathe what we breathe. And I think it's so funny. I've brought this up before, but you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson, as much as I love him, is like a huge alien denier. And sometimes I think he might be working for the government a little bit, because he says things like, it's impossible for life to exist anywhere where there's not like water and the right distance from the sun and like all the elements of life here on Earth. Well, yeah, it's impossible for our life to exist anywhere else, but every planet probably has their own life system and things that evolved in that system with those elements. So to say that life can only exist if it's exactly like us is pretty ignorant. Mariska even explains that by us breathing oxygen, we are actually speeding up our aging process, and that's how we're dying. And I find that really interesting because when you look at the science behind it, it actually does make some sense. He also had, you know, incredible detail for all of this stuff, scientific explanations for everything he was trying to explain. He said that his spaceship used plasma power and ion power, and if they used gasoline, the fuel would run out too fast.
Каждый раз имел свои там новинки, всякие технологии. Например, если у нас были плазменные ионы и двигатели, у других, например, были энергетические какие-нибудь.
And he also talked about teleportation and basically time traveling. And here's his exact quote on that. Portal is the same like teleport. It slows down time and opens a kind of portal where time is speeding up fast. I can't say exactly, I don't remember. It opens on one side, and in a few seconds or even a few minutes, if the transfer is far away, it opens another area of space. He did say that every single race of aliens had their own technology and innovation, so it's very vast throughout the universe, the types of technology and the types of energy sources each planet uses. When you look at what we're using, what we're doing, we look pretty archaic, like literally barbarians. And I think the biggest mistake we make as humans is thinking we're so evolved, we're like as good as it gets because we're like the smartest creatures here. It's just so close-minded and so unaware of how big your universe is and how much you don't know, which is way more than what you do know. So this is Dr. John Brandenburg. He is a PhD and he is a plasma physicist. He believes that life on Mars was eradicated by nuclear war. And he believes that a bunch of ancient civilizations that were super advanced are responsible for this. And he argues that the coloration and composition of the Martian soil points to a series of mixed fission explosions that led to nuclear fallout on the planet. Then there is James Green, who is the NASA Director of Planetary Sciences, and he said Mars is not the dry, arid planet that we thought of in the past. Liquid water has been found on Mars. Then we have John Grunsfeld, who is a 5-time space-flown astronaut, and he's also the Associated Administrator Head of NASA Science Mission Directive. And he says, we are going to Mars. Our journey to Mars is a science-led expedition right now. Soon I hope we'll be sending humans to the red planet to explore, and science will lead the way. And today's announcement of a really fascinating result about current water on Mars is one of the reasons why I feel it is even more imperative that we send astrobiologists and planetary scientists to Mars to explore the question of, is there current life on Mars? This is coming from a very high up person in NASA. He also said, the more we observe Mars, the more information we're getting that it really is a fascinating planet. From the Curiosity rover, we know now that Mars was once a planet very much like Earth, with long salty seas, freshwater lakes, probably snow-capped peaks and clouds, and a water cycle just like we're studying here on Earth. Something has happened to Mars. It lost its water. So what about the whole idea of beings still living inside of Mars? Well, this quote comes from Alfred McEwen, who is a principal investigator, works for High Rise in the University of Arizona. He said the possibility of life in the interior of Mars has always been very high. There's certainly water somewhere in the crust of Mars. It's very likely, I think, there is life somewhere in the crust of Mars. And here's another quote by James Green. Mars is the planet most like Earth. And in the past, Mars was a very different planet. It had an extensive atmosphere and in fact had what we believe was a huge ocean, perhaps as large as 2/3 of the northern hemisphere. And that ocean may have been as much as a mile deep. So Mars indeed 3 billion years ago had extensive water resources, but something happened. Mars suffered a major climate change and lost its surface water. And the last quote that I would like to share is from General Stubblebine. He is a retired United States Major General. He is also the commanding general of the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command. He is also one of America's most distinguished soldiers and chief of the U.S. Army Intelligence with 16,000 soldiers under his command. There are structures on the surface of Mars. I will tell you for the record that there are structures underneath the surface of Mars that cannot be seen by the Voyager cameras that went in 1976. The last quote that I want to share is from Brian O'Leary, who was a former NASA astronaut and a Princeton physics professor. There is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have already been contacting us for a very long time. Now, when you really turn on your thinking cap, like I say all the time, my favorite quote from Steve Jobs, everything around you that you call life was made up by someone no smarter than you. When you realize this, you are opened up to so many more ideas. Like, what makes more sense? And when you have it described like this, it makes much more sense that there's life on other planets, that there's more to all of this, that this isn't all by chance. And for some people, it's really hard to grasp because this is all you've ever known. And nothing is nearly as figured out as, you know, experts like to say that it is. We are still finding our way through this crazy life. There's still so much to learn. I found this very interesting. If you guys want to hear more past life stories, there's so many more I can do. But that's it for me today, guys. I hope this video left you thinking. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you next time. Bye.
A treasure